This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain. M.I.P.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson. Make It Plain. Get woke.
God bless you. Get woke. Folks, MIP is now COVID-free, meaning free to all subscribers as we navigate this pandemic. We're thinking about everyone, and we've got to get through this together. So for a limited time, no fee to subscribe to Make It Plain on your favorite podcast app. Folks, as always, it's a pleasure to take a little trip up to Maine to be joined by one who was using the word progressive before most of us who even listening right there. In 1964, he founded the publication known as the Progressiv Review. It's been going ever since then. Since 1964, we like to say the news while there's still time to do something about it. He also has a Grammy and an Oscar, millions of followers on social media, well-renowned musician. So he not only is a wordsmith, but he's a songsmith. Here to talk about all the latest, especially in this corona pandemic, is songsmith and wordsmith, Sam Smith.
Everybody, it's Sam Smith.
Who I found is Sam Smith. Hello.
Sam Smith, everyone. Sam Smith's album's called In the Lonely Hour. #1 on iTunes.
He is on everybody's one-to-watch list for 2014.
Give it up for Sam Smith.
Sam Smith's coming up right after this.
It was a Monday night when you told me it was over, babe.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm good. I won't challenge you on the music thing, but I should say that the original name for the Progressiv Review was the Idler, and then it became the DC Gazette, and then it became the Progressiv Review.
So what year did it actually become, the name become Progressiv Review? The Idler was 64, right?
64 through 69. I think it was sometime in the 70s that it became the Progressiv Review.
Well, that still predates most of us using it today. Really? I mean, we weren't saying. I got it right here. It says and folks, as always, you got to go to the website too, prorev.com. The Idler 64-67, DC Gazette 66 to 85, and then 85. The Progressiv Review is what it says. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And 40, and as I look at the archives, 40 years of print issues of the Progressiv Review and its predecessors are searchable. So we can find those things. That's great.
Well, that's almost true. It was a fellow named Ron Unz, who was actually a right-winger, who was, wanted to do an online archive of alternative publications. And he came by my office and asked me for copies. And I thought, well, no one's ever asked me for this before. I better let him have them. But there were a couple that were missing. And one that came up the other day was the issue in 1970 when I wrote why DC should become a state and how it could become a state.
Right.
And personally, I was able to find it in my own collection.
Yes, sir. So how are things in Maine these days?
Well, things are very, very quiet. It's being in a rural community is a good place to be at a time like this, because you're sort of used to not being with crowds. And we have a local market where I order things for a week or so, and then I can go and just pick them up, and in 5 minutes they bring them out and put them in the car. Yeah.
So that's still working for you?
That's still working great.
So I am looking, you wrote an essay. If you go to prorev.com, you can read Sam's essays as well. belated erratic reflections on unplanned solitude. I want to lift something here. I have also been struck by the fact that for the first time in my late life, I find my age to be an actual asset. As an 82-year-old, I and my peers are often considered something between non-essential to irrelevant. Thus, being assigned to a house for 8 weeks is not all that different. I have fewer board meetings canceled, fewer problems to be solved, fewer challenges to present or be presented with. Thus, I was a stay-at-home long before all this happened. Add to this my life as a writer accustomed to solitude, and what's happening now just doesn't seem as strange to me as it does for many. So you're handling it. You're okay.
Yeah, doing fine.
You don't get cabin fever.
No.
Now you're not getting on Kathy's nerves, are you?
Well, she just goes out and takes a walk when I do.
Very good. Very good.
The major problem in our 53-year-old relationship is that she still thinks that the computer is a person. And when it doesn't behave to her liking, she gets very annoyed at it. And she then gets annoyed at me for not being able to tell her what to do right.
Okay. Oh, okay. I can dig that. So you have been looking, and you share with me some of the latest statistics on this virus, haven't you?
Yeah, and it's I keep track of this daily, and there are a number of things which I think are kind of interesting. One is that globally, the number of new cases has actually started to rise again. It's 19% over what it was the previous week.
Mm-hmm.
For America, it's down about 1%. If you go look back to the peak in April, America's down about 20%, whereas globally it's up about 9%. But the other thing about America that people just don't talk about is that we're 31% of all the cases in the world, which is extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
Then as far as the states go, the highest number of cases remain in New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Massachusetts, California, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Texas. But all those states, except for Texas, California, and Florida and Michigan, have had a drop in new cases in the past 7 days compared to the previous week. What's sort of interesting is that some of these states, which have been kind of aggressive in weakening standards for safety, you find that Georgia is up 12%, Texas is up 94%, Florida is up 25%.
Right. I'm looking at another state you shared worldwide. The global death rate is 6.6% of all cases. And for the U.S., it is 6.1%.
Yeah, that hasn't changed an awful lot, that relationship.
Yeah. So the states that have weakened their lockdowns are up. Georgia, you said 12%, Texas 94%, Florida 25%.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the sheltering at home, the wearing of masks, the social distancing is working to keep the death rate down. Why don't these governors why don't they get it?
Well, there are an awful lot of people, starting with our president, who feel that you can talk yourself out of any situation. And this is, I think, one of the great liabilities we have as a country today is that public relations has taught us things that we shouldn't have learned. And so that we treat propaganda as an equal to scientific information and facts. And I was just watching, for example, a video of Obama in 2014 talking about the dangers of a pandemic crisis in this country. And the difference between him and Trump is just enormous on this subject.
Of course it is. Trump was very upset last week by some of the statements Obama made in his commencement addresses. But Obama was right.
Right.
Everything he said was true. And then they're threatening. What's your reaction to this whole Obamagate made up thing?
Well, I have a feeling that in terms of planning it, its purpose was sort of racist. It doesn't make any sense. But then you ask, well, why do you try to make such a big thing of it? And I think that the ethnic aspect of it is something that's really important. When I was in high school, we had sort of the beginnings of the Russian propaganda and all that sort of thing, and later on we had Joe McCarthy, and I was just sort of raised to think more about facts and BS.
Right.
And as I tell people, that I attribute my ability to understand someone like Trump to the fact that I was raised on comic books. And there were characters like Donald Trump, was very typical of comic books. But now we're in a situation in which not just Trump, but our whole society tries to tell stories which aren't true.
Right.
It's about how great they are, or about what they're doing. And
Right.
so it's very hard facts just don't have the same weight they used to.
You compare Trump to some comic book characters. So any specific comic book characters come to mind, Sam, that you would compare Trump to?
No, I can't think of any that come to mind. But
Okay. Yeah. They're even threatening. Well, like a guest said on the show last week, Eric Bowler of PressRun.media. He said, who would want to bring Obama back to run against? I mean, how do you win that? That's just stupid. And then to suggest that Obama should be subpoenaed to testify. Can you imagine Obama testifying for as many hours as Hillary Clinton on the stand as she did in Benghazi?
oh boy.
I don't think that helps Trump either, because
No.
Obama, is gonna charismatize. That's not a word. I just made that up. But he'll charismatize the whole audience and the whole country, and they will long for Obama more than Trump. And Obama can't run, so what are they going to do? People are going to vote for his vice president. How do you think Biden's doing?
I'm not enthralled, but
Really?
I'll wait and see who he picks for vice president. I just hope it's not Elizabeth Warren, not for her politics, but for the fact that you don't need two Easterners, liberal Easterners running together.
Who would be your first choice? I'm gonna put you on the spot. Who would be your first choice of vice president?
Well, I've pretty well narrowed it down to Kamala Harris, Whitmer in Michigan, and Klobuchar. And
Yeah, we just-
Stacey Abrams, some things she did, I wasn't too crazy about her because I thought she sort of promoted herself too much.
Yeah.
But
That's what some are saying. That's and I respect you saying, I mean, you're old school. That's not what you traditionally do. But nowadays people say, hey, why not?
yeah, why not? Yeah, that's right.
Especially if
But
you're
I found her that she was reading a book on the history of Huey Long. And I said, wait a second, this is really interesting. Because Huey Long was perhaps one of the most underrated politicians in our history that liberals should look more at. Because what he did was, and as he said, do I steal? Sure, I steal. All politicians steal. But the thing was that he built a tremendous amount of roads and bridges and did all sorts of good things for the state.
Mm-hmm.
And plus the number of registered blacks in Louisiana just went up enormously.
Right.
And it's a story. It's a little piece of history that we've forgotten, but it's well worth looking at. So I was very surprised to see her reading that.
So on Stacey and her, allegedly campaigning for the seat. And I get the thinking by many that that's traditionally not what's been done. But I thought about it the other day. What women have ever made it or been promoted or achieved positions of power and heightened authority without them having to make some noise for themselves? I mean, I think that's a part of what the women's experience is of trying to get somewhere. So I don't have as big of a problem with that. So we had Amy Klobuchar with us, and she, her name is talked about even more. Some are suggesting that Joe Biden, as a moderate, probably does not need another moderate.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, I don't know, I mean, I don't have a problem with any of them. I do think, quite frankly, for the African-American community, more on that in a minute, I know Black women who are the most loyal constituents of the Democratic Party want a Black woman. That's just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that you risk making them apathetic or upset by not picking a Black woman. I think it's very interesting what you said too. I hadn't thought about the double Easterner thing. Delaware and Massachusetts. That may be, when you talk about Elizabeth Warren, that may be very prescient on your part. I don't think anybody's brought that up. Yeah, but I think that's interesting. And some would say that doesn't matter either. The region doesn't matter. Because some people felt like Delaware didn't really bring anything to the ticket for Obama electoral. You used to pick vice presidents, I thought, Sam. You go back to Lincoln and others. Normally, you would pick a vice president based upon what type of electoral votes he helped you bring.
That's right. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah,
and that's why I thought about the governor of Michigan, for example.
Yeah.
It's a possibility. The problem I have with Kamala Harris is she's from California, which is a safe state. It's like Massachusetts, and that's a problem. Biden, one of Biden's assets is he is from Delaware, and Delaware is right next to Pennsylvania.
That's true.
And Pennsylvania is one of the swing states, and also it has its own sort of culture, which one of which is that if you're involved in politics, you learn to talk to people.
Yeah.
And that's a quality he has, which Trump, for example, doesn't. He can just shout at them.
Gretchen Whitmer definitely helps you with the blue collar state and a battleground like Michigan.
Right.
Georgia, though, Sam Smith, is in play now.
Uh-huh.
So Stacey helps you with that if you do that. Actually, you might pick up those Senate seats in Georgia too. That could happen. That used to be, out of the question, but not anymore. So it's
and it's important now. I mean, part of my thesis about politics and history in America is that the Confederacy lost the Civil War and succession and slavery, but it won everything else. And even to today, for example, out of the states that are most disinterested in securing safety in this climate and the virus, are 6 southern states.
Yeah.
And you look at all sorts of issues, and you realize that the South is still calling the shots. So having a vice president from Georgia would help in that respect.
So yeah, I would agree. So Biden went on a very popular radio show, The Breakfast Club, and said to a predominantly Black audience, if you vote for Trump over me, I'm paraphrasing, you ain't Black. Now, I'm not paraphrasing, you ain't Black part.
Yeah.
A lot of reactions all over the spectrum. What do you think about him saying that? Should he have said that?
Well, I think Biden has a tendency sometimes to say the wrong things. And I don't think it's
That's an understatement, Sam. That's an
that's an understatement. But I don't look at it as sort of an intellectual or political position. It's to me, it's just sort of more like careless, whatever goes through his head at that moment. And so that if he had thought for say 30 seconds about it, he wouldn't have said that.
He kind of said it in the tone like he wanted to say it.
Well, maybe.
Joe Biden kind of thinks he sees himself as kind of black anyway. Because he like
blacks decide that, not him.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. But there are, some African Americans who are making a big deal about it, some that are not.
Uh-huh.
I shared in another conversation that I still would apply your standard to this type of thing. We are obviously he's much worse for African Americans than Trump is much worse for African Americans than Biden is. So as you put it before, we should pick, and I want you to expound on this and put it in your own words, but we should pick the battlefield.
Right.
That's the term. So expound on that if you would. I mean,
for one thing, you're not electing a president, just a president. You're electing maybe 100 judges, including Supreme Court justices. You're also electing people who will make all sorts of federal regulations or remove all sorts of federal regulations.
Right.
For example, Trump has done in more environmental regulations than anybody in history.
Yeah.
And so that you have to think about it more like, say, the British and some of the Europeans do, is that you're electing a party, not just a individual.
Correct.
And, we tend to make it much too much an individual thing.
So I'm going to play the clip and then get your reaction. And then I'd like to expound on something you just said. So here he was. So the context is they're doing this interview, an aide cuts into an interview and says they're out of time. So, and this is with Charlemagne the God of the Breakfast Club. Take a listen.
Your time, I apologize.
You can't do that to black media.
I can't do that to white media and black media because my wife has to go on at 6:00.
Okay.
Oh, I'm in trouble.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
They don't have.
Sam, I mean that wasn't just if you didn't know it was Joe Biden, you might have thought it was a black person saying that.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that he screwed up mightily. And of course, all politicians do this. Some would, but I'm afraid that that Biden does have a little bit of a language problem, and I think that's one of the things we have to live with.
Well, but you also enlightened us months ago about his stuttering problem too.
Yeah. And
so all that goes together in terms of his thought process and what he says or doesn't say.
Right.
So I just think if Trump said that, then I think the reaction would be unanimous because of Trump's history and his record.
That's right.
But we've had, Sam, there have been plenty of white folks who have identified with our community and feel like honorary members. The Clintons, for example.
Mm-hmm.
As a musician, often musicianship has people cross over racial and ethnic lines.
Yeah.
I'm going to try something on you, because I was thinking about what you were saying about choosing the battlefield or the playing field. So if we're going to make the playoffs, we want home field advantage, right?
Okay.
Clearly, against Trump, Biden and the Democrats give us a home field advantage. If Trump's reelected, then the Republicans have home field advantage, and we're fighting an uphill battle. If the Democrats get elected for African Americans and other minorities and other people, poor, Barbara's constituency, others, we're still in a playoff sort of competition, in a match against whoever's in the White House. At least we should be, because none of us are really supposed to coddle presidents. We're supposed to hold them accountable. I know you'd agree. But wouldn't we rather have our home field advantage, at least someone that we know we can get to? We know Trump doesn't give a damn about what black people think of him. But Biden does not want to be considered a racist or insensitive or anything like that. So that gives us a bit of a home field advantage. What do you think of that analogy?
Well, I think there is that element to it. My own feeling is that what would really be desirable is for blacks and Latinos and labor unions to come together and form an alliance and come up with some working class issues that everybody would understand and appreciate. I think one of the problems is that blacks have been a very strong influence in this country, but right now you don't get any sense of them seeing themselves as the leaders of the whole country. You know, we're so much into identity politics that you sort of forgotten the fact that one of the ways you create change is for people who are like you and agree with you get power. And so that I think in terms of the, Kathy was just reminding me of Stride Towards Freedom, Martin Luther King's book.
Mm-hmm.
That was the best book I read in college. And because it hit me in ways that none of the professors did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that blacks and Latinos underrate their potential to have leadership over a greater part of the country, and they ought to think in those terms and how you do that. And one of the ways you do it is you make alliance with your like-minded friends.
Right. And if I friendly amendment to that, you make the alliance before 180 days before the election.
Yes, right.
In other words, and matter of fact, you make it now.
Make it now.
And then that coalition decides who the nominee is in 2024 and beyond, not in June of the election year, not just react to whoever's there. But you decide then, and you develop and nurture candidates for all of these offices that serve and overlap the Black, Latino, and organized labor community. Would you not agree?
That's right.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's missing now, I think, say compared to the 60s, is the lack of a counterculture. We don't really have an alternative to what we're faced with in a sort of a social and cultural way, and that involves things like music and art and lifestyle.
Right.
And it's just something that people don't even talk about now.
Right. In your state, it looks like Sarah Gideon is still hovering, according to Rasmussen. I'm seeing all. I know you look at a lot of poll average. I don't know if you're up on this one, but Sarah Gideon, the Democratic nominee for senator, has like a 3-point lead.
Yeah, 3 or 4. Yeah.
Susan Collins. We'd like that to be a little more comfortable, wouldn't we?
Oh yeah. I guess what I'm wondering about is Bill Kristol just announced he was going to vote for the Democrat, and I've been wondering how many people are getting tired of Trump, and they're not talking about it, but they're just sort of, it's happening to them.
Well, a lot of people from 60 up to your age group are.
Yeah.
Now that's that's that constituency that they count on the right.
Sure.
That's if that holds, that pretty much wraps this thing up. And
Right.
those are that's the most reliable voting population.
Yeah.
I'd like to think we wouldn't get 53% of white women to go that way again either. And I don't see how. I don't see how they could. He has overseen the deaths of thousands and done nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is that one of the things, going back to this counterculture thing, is one of the problems I feel is a lack of sort of a feeling of what a different sort of society would be like,
mm-hmm.
and why we should enjoy that idea. And just as a small example, right now, one of the issues is going to be very big, is going to be economic ones. And I would say this is an excellent time to push cooperatives, because cooperatives work in a different sort of way than your classic corporation, and they help both the customers and the people who work for them in a different way.
Yeah.
But that sort of thing is creating some new values and some new feelings, and I think there's a real potential for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if there's some song we could sing, that wouldn't hurt either.
A song, a movement song.
Yeah.
So is there one? You're gonna write one? You're Sam Smith.
No, I don't think I can do that. But I may have said this to you before. But I every time I see my granddaughter's bedroom door, and it has a peace symbol on it, I say to myself, why is this the last symbol that had that power? You know,
Wow.
the 16-year-old is still using it.
Yeah, still using it. It has stood the test of time, indeed. Folks, we invite you to go to Progressive Review, prorev.com. A number of headlines up there, as well as Obama's take on the pandemic issue in 2014, as Sam mentioned. There's a stark partisan divide on reopening America, and also a headline: a court rules Michigan Governor Whitmer can continue state of emergency without legislative approval. And then Trump's virus drug found to be highly dangerous. Oh, one other thing, you also wrote an essay in the past week. The Supreme Court will decide whether America is now a dictatorship.
Yeah, because if the Supreme Court gives Trump the power he's asking them for, we might as well just call it a dictatorship. I've noticed that a lot of the media is using the term king, making Trump a king. No, he's not being made a king. He's being made a dictator. And I think this court decision is going to be very instrumental in that.
Can I give you an assignment?
Yes, sir.
I'm giving my 82-year-old elder an assignment, folks. So Michael Tomasky of the Daily Beast hipped me to a book he wrote about New York Times a few years ago. It was published in 2010, entitled Competitive Authoritarianism, Hybrid Regimes After the Cold War. And the notion of competitive authoritarianism is just like we have here now, but we don't have that name for it because we haven't read the book, most of us. You even have elections. You have the appearance of democracy, Sam, but it's really an authoritarian regime.
Mm-hmm.
Competitive authoritarianism. I'm you know what? I'm just gonna give it to Sam. I want readers. Let's all look at this. Lucan Way is the author. Lucan Way and Stephen Levitsky. And if those guys are still around, maybe we might even have them on the show. And Sam, I may have you join me to talk to them. But I that looks like where we are, because we still have elections. We're supposedly going to have election in November, even though they're going to tamper with it. They don't want people to vote by mail. But a competitive, so again, the competition, because you got the elections going on, and you have these other branches of government. but it's still authoritarianism. It's just a competitive.
Right. That's right.
form of. That's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we should check that out together. ProRev.com. Since 1964, the news, while there's still time to do something about it. Sam, thank you. You look great. Hope Kathy's great.
Yeah, she's doing fine.
And glad you all are staying safe and inside, man.
Yes, sir.
All right. Love you guys. Give her my love.
Take care. Will do.
All right.
God, you are our refuge. Send our ancestors to guard our doors. Cast out this virus from our communities and our bodies. Heal, bless, and protect everyone listening and their loved ones. If all minds are clear, it has been made plain. Thank you for listening to Make It Plain and Get Woke. Remember to listen, like, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If all minds are clear, it has been made plain.